Well done. Good.
So for me as a learner, there was 3 main points. It was easier when practicing the skill as one whole movement rather than breaking it down. Having the coach demonstrate the technique gave me a clear idea of what the skill looked like. It was great for my understanding. This gave me a visual interpretation to support the verbal explanation of the skill. The 50% frequency feedback during the first 2 weeks was great, as I was only beginning to understand everything involved. It was helpful as I was not overwhelmed by all the key aspects of the skill. For the discovery learning technique to be employed after week 2 allowed me to get comfortable with the skill in my own way, as I knew what I was doing and how I could modify the technique to suit myself.
And me as the coach, I found that the student responded well to the visual learning demonstrated in week 1. From what I saw, it was important to demonstrate the technique first, as it is quite a technical skill, allowing the learner to see how all the skills they were about to learn come together to produce one fluid movement was not only important, but also helpful for the learning process. Fortunately, I do believe that the correct learning techniques were employed during the training session. Allowing for discovery learning helped the athlete to make the skill their own, allowing the athlete to see her results, being knowledge of results, and performance, knowledge of performance, allowed the athlete to see how she was performing, and when modifying the skill, allowed her to see what was successful and what was not. In our proposal, we suggested that less feedback will be given as the weeks went by, but technically this wasn't correct. Although the performance-specific feedback was not given as often to the athlete towards the end, as she became more proficient, encouragement was given regularly, as well as positive feedback to aid the success of the athlete. As a general statement, the athlete improved on the skill over the 10 training sessions.
Discovery learning was employed throughout the training sessions. At the beginning of the program, a lot of feedback was needed, and towards the end, very little feedback was given, as the student learnt from their mistakes and altered their actions accordingly. This concept is supported by a study involving Solomon and Kozmitsky, who discovered that more feedback was needed at the beginning of the season and less towards the end of the season.
One of the shortcomings was that the athlete did not always meet the criteria of the skill, yet improved throughout the training sessions. I believe this is a result of the discovery learning technique. The discovery learning technique, which involves learning from the experience rather than providing specific instructions, allow the athlete to make slight alterations to the initial layup technique taught in the first training session, making the movement more fluid and comfortable to her specific stature and athletic ability. This is shown in the results, as the athlete did not necessarily meet the criteria I was looking for, being the correct knee angle, correct elbow angle, correct wrist flexion and angle, but was successfully achieving the overall goal by getting the basketball in the hoop. It must be understood that although the technique was altered, the athlete did in fact execute a layup, and it was not a different skill altogether.
If we could redesign the project, the main thing we would change is the type of motivation and feedback. Our focus was on augmented feedback, but we found that intrinsic motivation played a big role in the improvement of the student. When focusing on the discovery learning technique, intrinsic feedback played a big role for the student as she altered her technique to suit her own playing style and athletic ability.
It was important to have a plan, as well as short-term and long-term goals. It is important to break down and analyse a skill before attempting to coach it. It is essential to find out the learner's past experience and what skills can be transferred over to the new skill. It is also important to have a valid test to record and compare the improvement and progress throughout the training program, which can be achieved through a pre, mid and retention test.
So what was not as successful was the motivation. We focused on augmented feedback but should have employed intrinsic feedback to support the discovery learning technique. Being more specific with our planning of practice, i.e. should we use a whole or a part practice approach to the teaching of the skill, and we should have chosen either a massed or distributed schedule for our practice.